the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. This Sunday represents a sort of convergence of a number of important points in the ecclesiastical year. First of all, it is the Sunday which is called Refreshment Sunday, which is the fourth Sunday in Lent, at which time, when possible, we use the rose-colored vestments. Mine have sort of turned salmon, which is interesting from a plant to a fish. It's kind of a miraculous color transformation. In any event, the Refreshment Sunday, about which we shall say something very soon, it is also just the day before the actual date of the martyrdom of the Catars in 1244 in the Languedoc, known to us as Montségur Day. That is why we still have the icon picture of the castle of Montségur above the altar. In addition to that, it is also 2 days away from the holiday of the Irish people of their patron saint, Saint Patrick. And so this is a convergence of many sort of sacred thoughts. And as far as I'm concerned, the more sacred thoughts we have, the better off we are. So let them just converge as much as they might. Now, in terms of the martyrdom, we have commemorated that with our usual solemnity on Friday, because we always do that on the Friday nearest to the day, and I have spoken on that occasion at that time. Let me just say that the terrible events of that time and the sacred place where they had taken place is still very much in the consciousness of many people, not only in France, but in many other places. I remember the time when we made our pilgrimage quite a number of years ago. I spoke on the telephone with one of our Gnostic bishops there at that time, dear Bishop Gautier, who said to me on the phone that, we told him that we were on our way to Montségur, that, that is the most holy place in our country. And I could tell by his voice that he meant it. So this is a very important way of remaining in touch with our tradition. As far as St. Patrick is concerned, I know that there are people around who sort of, for whom the last few decades kind of everything has come up Celtic. There are a variety of the green people, but these are the shamrock green people. I like them better than the other kind. So, there is often sort of the idea, St. Patrick, he was the one who brought in the Christians and they kicked out the pagans and whatever the case may be. Those considerations really don't mean anything. I'll tell you why they don't mean anything. Because in a case such as this, the patron saint, revered for such a long time by the Irish people, it becomes an archetype. It becomes a spiritual image. It becomes a commixture of a symbol and of a reality, especially for the people who regard it as such, and the historical circumstances which may have originated that iconic archetypal figure are meaningless. Now I draw the line in some cases, like for instance, I very seriously doubt that you will hear me celebrate the day of Saint Dominic. Dominic, I think that is probably, we leave that to others. There are plenty of others doing that. But those are things that one needs to remember. Now the scriptures for Refreshment Sunday, which is has been ordained, at this on the fourth week of Lent, precisely for that purpose, that people might refresh themselves, that they might take perhaps a little vacation from all the fasting and things of that sort, and the things that they give up for Lent. It's a very important Sunday, and as such, it has two rather interesting readings attached to it. The first one, St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, where St. Paul sort of lapses a little bit into his Pharisee background, because that's what he was in terms of his original sect, because before the road to Damascus, he was a Pharisee, and so he goes on about all these things that, you should just follow the things that are lovely and of good report, and the things of many virtue and praise and so forth, which is kind of, the Pharisees were sort of the original Puritans, but thank God still without Calvin, which makes all the difference. And then, however, he says, which is, I'm sure, why we had selected that one for the Refreshment Sunday, rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. And then he says, again he takes away from it a little bit, let your moderation be known unto all men. Well, how can you really rejoice when you are so terribly moderate? Well, one of the ways to deal with that is, of course, is a sort of a late Gnostic saying. I think it's part of the Gnostic gospel of the Hollywoodians. And that one says, moderation in all things, including moderation. So you may wish to keep that in mind. But you also need to keep in mind, to be perfectly fair to dear old St. Paul, that these people lived in the Roman Empire, and the Romans, interesting and efficient people as they were, one thing they didn't have, for some reason, is table manners. And so, when they had their banquets and things like that, they were really, especially toward the end, pretty disgusting. I'm not going to go into details, but they were unhygienic and disgusting. Saint Clement of Alexandria, who an Alexandrian Christian with a lot of sympathy for Gnosis, must have really been a very nice gentleman to know. He was sort of telling people, look, people, when you are having a dinner and so, you could make it a little bit nicer, and really don't do those things that you usually do. And I say, I'm sure that St. Paul is also referring to that to some extent. However, I think his injunction to us to rejoice is valid, but we need to do that often. There is not so much in this world that makes one rejoice, and so I think the real rejoicing often comes from beyond this world. And that is very much present in the Gospel of Philip, which, unless you pay close attention to it, sounds like a very strange passage, because really the Gospel of Philip says that good and bad in this world are always mixed. You seek for the good, you can try to strive for the good, but the other is always there. It is not possible to separate them from one another. And for this reason, really, the two principles, the positive and the negative, the good and the bad, they will, this is very Jungian. I wonder whether Dr. Jung had access to the Gospel of Philip or not. He did have to some of the others, because he says that they will be resolved into their origin from the beginning. In other words, the dualities will be united, and that's when it will be resolved. Meanwhile, the most important statement for us is those who are exalted above the world are indissoluble and eternal. So the task is to realize that it's a futile endeavor to try to effectively sort out the good and the evil in this world, because somehow, somewhat like the old Chinese symbol of the yin and the yang, which always has a little seed of the opposite inside, you never get away from the opposites. And that is something that we need to recognize at a practical level. It doesn't mean that we can't enjoy ourselves, or that we can't have good and beloved friends and associates and so forth, but just recognize that everything that, say, is good, so also has a little bitty bit of the nastiness in the back of it. And if we are not very, very lucky, you know what, it's going to pop out. It's going to come out. And then you say, oh, I thought that this was such a good thing or such a good person, and look what just happened. It's the way of the world. This is the way things are put together. And one has to sort of navigate with that to the best of one's ability. And so let's say if you have a nice person whom you really like a lot, and every once in a while, I don't know, they become grumpy or, do something to you that you don't like, then just remember, they are really okay, but like everything else, they have a little bit of that other in them, and one has to deal with that and go on from there, because that's the way the things in this world are put together. Even the saints, the greatest of saints, when you look in their lives and so on, you have some strange things in there which some people might consider not terribly good. Saint Francis had a temper, and he was not terribly conscious of his hygiene, which was probably pretty common in the Middle Ages. But when he went to Rome to see the Pope, that was the first thing the papal chamberlain said, oh, there is this strange guy from Assisi who has come, but guys, he smells bad. And the Pope said, don't worry about it, I had a dream about him, let him come in, So there is always something, there is always a shadow side that is present. But then the Gospel of Philip, in true Gnostic fashion, finishes up, those who are above the world are indissoluble and eternal. So what is it then? If we want reality, transcendental reality, then we, in some fashion, we have to rise above the world. Above the world, that's something else. In the world is again something else. And this has not been properly understood by Christendom, primarily, I think, because they got rid of the gnosis. So if you want that which is truly good, if you want that which is light without a shadow, then the only place where you are going to contact it will be above this sublunar sphere, as it so romantically has been called, the place below the moon where we are. And there, that's a different matter. And but you say, well, how can I do that? I'm here in this world. What do you want me to do? You want me to get a rocket ship and go up above this world? Well, we have done that too, in our age, but that's a physical mimicking, shall we say, of the spiritual process. And the spiritual process simply is that when we are able to experience the kind of transcendentally altered consciousness that exists, and that has various degrees and various levels and so forth, but has been called gnosis, then we are above that duality. As if There was a story about that, but I'm not going to retail it. That I actually heard the late and great Bishop Pike tell once, and so I can modify that. He spoke of the little moth, very archetypal being, especially when it makes an archetypal hole in your sweater. But the little moth that was crawling around on the ground, and there were all kinds of colors down there, and so the moth adapted itself to the colors, and sometimes it felt, when it was in red, it felt angry, when it was in blue, it felt blue, silly things like that. And then it rose up, had wings by then, and looked down, and it could see that there was a certain pattern there. That was Bishop Pike's story. And I modified that by saying that the floor is the proverbial checkerboard, black, white, black, white. So you are in the white and you say, oh, things are nice, really good, let's have another drink, or whatever the case may be. But then, as you keep, next one you're on the black square, and that's not so pleasant. And that's one after the other. That's the way they go. But when you are above that, you are not walking on that tessellated pavement anymore, but your consciousness is in another region, in a superior air. Then these things, they're still there, they haven't gone away, but you are not there, at least not in consciousness. And that's all that matters. The trouble with all kinds of people, some of them well-intentioned and some of them just miserable people, nasty, and who are in the world and who are making all kinds of wars and revolutions and oppressions, this is the thing that all they think about is down there. That's all they concentrate on. And they don't realize really the futility of their efforts. Oh yeah, we're going to have a wonderful heaven on earth, the paradisical dictatorship of the proletariat, good old Karl Marx and the rest of them, using the word good advisedly and ironically. Oh yeah, and so of course it doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Because it can't happen. It's contrary to the nature of the situation. It's contrary to the way the reality here is put together. And you can sit for not just a few years, but for 100 years in the British Museum, which might be nice because it's an interesting place, You should go there sometime. And try to figure out the perfect scheme whereby to reorganize society. It's still not going to work. It never has. It doesn't work now. I would say it's very, very likely it's not going to work in the future. But you see, the mind is a great arrogant one, the slayer of the real, as Blavatsky said. I can figure out how to fix this. Oh yeah? Pardon me for laughing in a deleterious or at least disdainful manner. And so you see, it's not moving along more on the horizontal plane, but discovering the vertical plane and getting above all of this, that the answer truly exists. Now that doesn't mean that improvements cannot be made on the terrestrial plane. Well, sure. Look, we have airplanes doing things that only birds used to do before, which maybe means that it's all for the birds, I don't know, but something like that. We have made all kinds of improvements, but the principle of the good and the bad both being present and acting upon us in their own ways, that has not gone away, and that will not go away. And that is where one has to lift up one's vision. It always has been said, lift up your eyes to the heights, to the everlasting hills, and so forth. Look up, look up. And the up is the symbol of beyond. And when that becomes possible, you know, even if it just happens once or twice in your entire life, then you know that this exists. And you know that it can happen because it did happen to you. And therefore the next conclusion is that it will happen to you again. It's very basic Gnostic thinking. And then people say that that's pessimistic, because you say that the earth plane cannot be substantially improved. Well, you know what, buddy? You improve it for me and then I'll believe it, but nobody else has done it. Nobody is doing it now. On the other hand, look at all the saints, look at all the visionaries, look at all the people at Montségur. They rose above. Of course, they were on a high mountain too, but that's not the time. And therefore, it is possible. And therefore, we have to lift up your hearts. Sursum corda, as it is called in Latin. Lift up your hearts, lift up your consciousness. Keep lifting up as well and as often as you can. And realize that it's not this uplifted, exalted condition is not something that we can inhabit permanently at this time, although certainly we hope that we may be able to inhabit it permanently at some other time. And so do that, and between that, have a good time when possible. Refresh yourself. Go from the labor of this world whenever possible to the refreshment, which then gives you the strength in this world to keep on going and to eventually, in the God's good time, be able to rise above it, and perhaps even rise above it permanently, and to go to that from which you have come, and whither assuredly you must go again. And so may the mystery of that which hangs twixt heaven and earth descend upon us and remain with us always. Amen.